Good afternoon, and welcome to the Dole Institute of Politics. My name is Emily Depew, and I am a member of the Dole Institute Student Advisory Board, the official student group of the Dole Institute. The Student Advisory Board is a bipartisan group of members who can access many great opportunities through their involvement. If you are a student and would like to join, please contact us by emailing dolesab@ku.edu. After the presentation, we'll have time for some questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and a student worker with a microphone will come to you. Please stand if you're able and ask just one brief question. If you have difficulty hearing during the program, please alert one of our staff members or student volunteers who will assist you. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you to please turn off your cell phones. Now please join me in welcoming the director of the Dole Institute of Politics, Bill Lacey.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you all for turning out for this important program this afternoon. I'm very excited about this, delighted that we could get it scheduled. I have the honor today of introducing an old friend and a new friend. The old friend is Ernie Garcia. He has an amazing story, Marine, Kansan, public servant, Secretary of the United States Senate under Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, and a lot more that you're going to hear about today. My new friend is Dennis Garcia. He's Ernie's first cousin. He attended KU Law. He practiced law for a career and also served as a magistrate judge. He very skillfully tells Ernie's story. As a reminder, we'll be selling Dennis's book and having a book signing after our program today. Christmas is coming up. It's a great time of year for a good gift. So I want you to buy a lot of books. I'm going to buy one. So please welcome Ernie and Dennis Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see all of you here, friends and family and new friends. I've already met friends of Ernie that I had not met previously and wrote about, but had not personally met them. So it's a real honor to be here. And hopefully we'll be able to give you some insights and about the book and how it was written, and maybe clear up anything that you have read about and had questions. And I'm just real pleased to be here and back on campus.
Thank you, Dennis. And again, I want to thank all of you for coming today. It's a beautiful day to be outside, but you're inside, so I apologize for that. I guess I want to start off by saying that this book has been in the making for about 25 years. A very dear friend of mine, Dr. Randy Bowling, my high school classmate and college classmate here at KU, about 25 years ago began to encourage me to write about my experiences. And at first it was a total joke. I couldn't imagine writing about myself. Quite frankly, I was afraid that I would say something that wasn't true or embellish. But for 25 years, he would, every time he'd see me or call me, he'd say, how's that book coming? And it wasn't. And had a family reunion, 2 or 3 years ago?
4.
4 years ago. And we have a big family, so we were in Colorado Springs up in the mountains, and I think we took up one major building where we all slept, and then we ate at a cafeteria style, so we had a lot of family. But one evening, Dennis comes up and says, can I talk to you for a little bit? And well, certainly. And then he says, what would you think about writing your life story? I said, well, I've gone through that before, and I wasn't all that enthused about it. But the more we talked, I realized that I was talking to somebody who really could do it. I tried to do it. I started, but after one page, I'd crumple it up, and it was frustrating. And what do I do first? What do I say? How do I say it? Do I take credit for this? Who should I? It was just too much for me. So when Dennis offered, I said, well, this may be it. And fast forward, 2 years later,
4.
4 years
4
later?
years. Not quite 4 years.
Well, the book is out. And I'm very thankful to Dennis. Had he not stepped up to the plate, I don't know that I would have done this. And what it is for me, initially, I didn't want it, as I have said. I didn't want a book written about me. And I kept thinking about me. I don't want to write about me, and I don't want to write about what I've done. And then several people, including Dennis, including my wife, Amy, and my son, Philip, and in particular, Randy Bowling, said, look, man, it's not about you. Put that aside. It's not about you. It's about an experience. It's about a story that needs to be told, not for you, but for people who are going to come after you. I've got 2 of my grandchildren here. They don't understand right now, but one of these days they'll have a chance to read the book, and they'll know what life was like. Whenever there's a biography written, I've been told that a biography is a tough document. It includes the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we've got all 3 things in this book. But with all due respect. What? No, when I say ugly, some things that sad, disappointing, painful, the death of my father, the death of my mother. So it has started. I got to thinking about the book, and certainly there is the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to say initially that my life wouldn't be what it is or what it was had it not been for a lot of people along the way. My grade school teachers, my coaches, my friends in high school. I used to work at J.C. Penney's in Garden City selling shoes. That's where I learned how to sell shoes to someone who didn't need a pair of shoes. So it was the gift of selling and gabbing, and then I pumped gas. But all along, people were there to help and support. Many people have written me, emailed me, and said they wish they could be here, but they live all over the state, some out of the state. But there's a lot of people who were there to help me. I'll tell you an abbreviated story that kind of it gives you some sense of the kind of people that were there to help me, and in this case, me and my brother. It was during the summer. I even forget the year because I wanted to forget this experience. Never have. It sticks in my mind. But one summer, several of us tried to climb the grain elevator in Garden City. But the stairs to climb up were too high. We stood on a truck, and it was still too high. And someone said, well, let's go try the water tower. Well, we just climbed the fence, and the steps were easy to eat. Anyway, up we go, and we get up on top, and you can get around the tower, but then as you're climbing, you look down, and you're not vertical anymore. You're getting pretty close to being horizontal. And I didn't do that, but I had some of my friends who were in the process of doing that when all of a sudden we hear, all right, boys, come on down, we see you. You know, it was police, obviously. And so I quickly made my way down. And my brother and another friend told the cops, if you don't leave, we're going to jump. Well, obviously they didn't jump, and we spent one night in jail. But that was a good learning experience for me. The fellow who I worked for, the story I want to convey, his name was Rudy Perez. He was the owner of a gas station right there, right downtown Garden City. I worked for him. Well, I didn't show up for work. So he called my mom, or my mother called him. The boys didn't come home last night. Do you know where they are? No, don't know where they are. I was going to call you because Ernie hadn't showed up for work. And so my mother was very concerned. So Rudy said, don't worry, Mrs. Garcia, let me handle it. First thing he does is call the police station. And I was there. And a $5 fine for trespassing. But Rudy, had it not been for Rudy, you know, he was kind of a male figure in my life who cared and who gave me a second chance and who taught me things. And so it's people like that that I've been so fortunate to be around. And it is those people that I give a lot of credit for the experiences that I've had. From there on to high school, great friends, like I said, Randy Bowling, Dr. Bowling, and many others. We have a very close-knit high school class. We still connect with each other on a regular basis. So that tells you kind of what I had in high school. And then I tried to get into college, and I had not been very serious about school, so didn't have the grades, didn't have the money. But eventually, I joined the Marine Corps, and then came home for a while. Tried to get back into. Actually, I got into Wichita State University, but I had a girlfriend here, so I wanted to be at KU. And someone in the crowd here today, whom I have not seen in a long, long, long time. Where is Ken? There he is. Dr. Ken Martinez. He was here on campus, one of the professors. I had already met with another professor, Dr. Herman Lujan. He was a political science teacher, very bright guy. That's who I went to see first, because somebody told me to go see him. And so I did, and he said, well, you need to go see Dr. Martinez. And so I, unannounced, I show up, and I'm Ernie Garcia, help me, I'm trying to get in, help me, help me, help me. And I was encouraged because he didn't dismiss me. He listened and he said, well, let's see what we can do. I got in. Not only did I get in, but I got a job with Dr. Lujan. Then I ended up being the assistant dean of men. I was a graduate student senator. So things got better for me, and I began to realize that, if you work hard, there's good things that can happen, and they did. I was talking to somebody just before I walked in. Somebody asked me how I got to D.C. I worked on my graduate degree. I was interning for the governor, and Senator Dole was coming to visit him, and he asked the governor to be on the lookout. He was looking for somebody from Western Kansas, preferably a veteran, to bring on staff in Washington. And the governor said, well, I think I know. I think I know somebody. I was a budget analyst, so I got to know the governor pretty well. So he said, I think I got somebody. The phone calls went back and forth, and I was offered a job in D.C. I'd never been to D.C. I'd never been east of St. Louis, so I didn't know anything about D.C. I didn't know about the job. It was a legislative assistant. But I packed up my son, Philip, and his mother, and we took off. U-Haul rental. I had a little sports car, a very, very old sports car. We put it in the back of the truck and took off. And I was making $17,500 back then, which I thought was a lot because I was making $750 a month here. And that's when my political life began to develop. And again, one of the greatest mentors of my life was Senator Dole. I don't know how well most of you know the senator, but he's not a chit-chat kind of guy. I mean, he's about results. He's about hard work. He's about if you got an assignment, carry out your assignment. And I picked that up real quick. But before I picked that up real quick, I had a chance to talk with him. And I said, Senator, appreciate the opportunity to be here. I love it. It's great. I said, but I just want to make a comment. I don't want to be considered to be your Hispanic token on staff. And he looked at me like, the hell are you talking about? And he said, you're not going to be any different than anybody else. You're going to do as I tell you. You're going to go where I tell you to go. And so I got the message real quick that I was not going to be a Hispanic token. And I wasn't. But whenever anything came that I could use my ability to speak Spanish, I got assigned to it, which allowed me to go to Central and South America with him. Some real exciting times. The sale of the Panama Canal, I went with him. Actually sat behind the senator while he and General Omar Torrijos talked about the sale of the Panama Canal. And I'll forego all the stories that I wish we had time to tell, but what happened, what began to happen to me was I got so immersed in my work that I would come back from a trip and find it hard to believe that I had been there and done the things that I had done. And that just kept multiplying and multiplying. I've gone to, 140, 150 countries through the military and through government. But I didn't know much about where I had been because I usually went with the Department of State, Department of Defense, on jobs, on working. So now that I don't have to punch a time clock anymore, Amy and I travel quite a bit now, and I go to places that I've been to but didn't know anything about it. So now we're spending time actually learning about the places that I've been to but couldn't begin to tell you. But again, the issue for me was I didn't want this thing to be about me, and fortunately I had good friends who said it's not about you. It's about the history. It's about your family. It's about your country. It's about the University of Kansas. KU is a very, very important part of my life. I sat on my father's lap when I was a little boy he was in a rocking chair, rocking back and forth, listening to KU in North Carolina play, was it the finals?
The finals,
And,
1957.
Unfortunately, we lost, but that's when Wilt Chamberlain was playing, and from that point on, KU was, I mean, it was the only place I would ever want to go. Never did I think I would go, because didn't have the money and didn't have particularly the good grades, but I ended up, dream came true, ended up in Washington with one of the greatest senators that we've had in the history of our country, I believe. He's a true patriot, a true hero. I learned an awful lot from the senator. I just spoke to him a couple of weeks ago. It's hard to understand him now, but he corrected me on, we were talking about something, and I said, you know, back in 1980 something, we did this, we did. He said, no, that was in 1981, and Senator Baker was there, not Senator. So you know, he's still very sharp, but he loses something every day. But he's positive. You talk about somebody who has a will to live. That's Bob Dole, and that's the way he always was. Hardworking, and the thing I loved about him that unfortunately does not exist today is the art of compromise. He wouldn't hesitate to walk across the political aisle and work with. I'll never forget when he was a co-sponsor with Senator Ted Kennedy on the food stamp bill. He got a lot of flack from the ultra-conservatives for that, but that bill helped a lot of people, but that's the kind of person he was. It was about serving the country, not serving a political party. The farmers, veterans, handicapped. He was just, and they all loved him. I mean, he had a constituency that went from coast to coast with handicap and veterans. So I learned a lot from the senator, and I read about his military experiences. You know, he got shot and almost killed 2 weeks before the war ended. You know, it's sad, but as he says, as he has often said, it was probably a blessing in disguise, because from that he learned the importance and the value of honor, courage, commitment, and just plain old hard work. And that's all I know of Bob Dole. I worked for him for years, off and on. Even when I wasn't working for him, he would call me up and say, "Hey, Ernie, I need you to do this, do that," like I still work for him. But you know, whatever he wanted, I was always there for him. But the experiences in the Senate were just awesome. In the White House under Reagan, I had that privilege and honor. I got to meet him and help him, work for him. And then I spent some time at the Department of Defense as Assistant Secretary of Defense. And then the war came. And I'd stayed in the reserves, the Marine Reserves. I'd go on deployments, come back, but this time I got orders to go on active duty, and that was the first Gulf War. I was gone for about 2 years, came back, and by that time I had already left the Senate. I was in a private sector, came back to my job, and then was in the private sector for a number of years, and then the other war came, and a friend of mine, a colonel friend of mine, called me and said, you want to go play in the sand? And I said, yeah. I've always enjoyed walking on the edge. And I said, yeah. He said, you sure? I said, yeah. You got something? He said, I got something now, right now. I said, okay. So in about a month, I was in Iraq, part of the 24th, what we call the MU, about 2,500 Marines. We have air, land, and sea assets. It was a huge responsibility. I learned a lot there. By this time, I was much older than the corporals and the lance corporals and the sergeants. But I remember when I was a sergeant, and so I used to love to go with them. And the other colonels would say to me, "What are you doing? You're making us look bad." But I loved going with those young kids, those amazing young patriots. They knew their job. They wanted to do their job. They loved their country. They loved each other. They took care of each other. And when they found out I was a Mustang, that's what we call someone who's been enlisted and then becomes an officer. When they found out I was a Mustang, it was like I was their father. And they took good care of me. But we'd go on patrol, and they would give me assignments on what to do and how to do it. And that was probably some of the most memorable times that I've had in the Middle East. Prior to the Second War, I was deployed to Haiti. There was a coup. There was a coup, and we got sent to Haiti, where there was a lot of street fighting and a lot of threats to the population. Crime was rampant. No law, no order, and so we stayed there for about 6 months and got that under control. And then, literally 2 weeks after that, I was on my way to Iraq. My wife kept saying, "I thought you were going to retire. I thought you were going to retire." She had asked me that several years before that, but I wasn't ready. But there are two things in my life that I will promote with great enthusiasm, and that is KU and the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is a big part of my life. I wish I had another life. I'd do the same thing, but I don't. But I have great friends who are Marines. I recruited a lot of Marines. So and the reason why I say that is when sometimes I see my friends have T-shirts that have Coca-Cola or Harley Davidson, or and I'm thinking, I'm not going to advertise for them. When are they going to pay me for advertising? But I'll do it for KU and I'll do it for the Marine Corps. And then I came home, and it took a while for me to get back in shape, mentally and physically. But the VA, by the way, for those who have only heard that it's a bad organization, I can't speak any more positive than to say I love them. They have been very, very good to me. It's like I have a whole team ready to take care of me. They'll call me, "How you doing? How you feeling?" Unfortunately, there are some VA hospitals that don't have that reputation. But I was at the Topeka VA hospital. Now I'm at the Kansas City VA hospital. But I have great health care. So next time you hear somebody talk about the VA, you can tell them that you know somebody that spoke very highly of the VA. So how did I end up back in Kansas? Well, first of all, I got tired of D.C. Cost of living, too many people, too many cars. Even though it was a great experience, we lived on a boat, we lived in high-rise, it was a great experience, but we had had enough. And so again, I was looking to come home, and I talked to then Senator Brownback, and when he came home and won, he called me and said, how would you like to head up the highway patrol? And right down my alley, another gun that I could carry on my hip and chase bad guys. So I did. I came home, and I got one of my best troopers sitting back there, Mark Below, and his wife, Susie. Mark was very helpful to me, loyal, but more than that, he's a great public servant. He took care of the community. He took care of his constituency in the right way. He was polite, but you didn't mess with Mark. But he was first. He wanted to help. And that's what law enforcement ought to be. How can we help? But if you don't want our help and you start pushing back, then we'll help you in other ways. But Mark, thank you for all that you've done. Appreciate it. And then I began to have some heart issues. And I thought, I don't think it would be a good thing for me to have an episode while I'm in the car with a gun on my hip. So with the help of my wife, we arranged for heart surgery and had it done. I'm okay. I'm fine. But there are different. People say, well, you look good. I said, well, I got a few broken bones, and I got some bruises, and I got aches and pains. But I get up in the morning, and that's all I care about. And so now we live in Overland Park. My wife, Amy, Dr. Amy Garcia, she's a professor at the KU School of Medicine, Nursing in Kansas City. We live in Overland Park, like I said. We love our home. We love our neighborhood. I couldn't be happier. But I must admit that I do miss walking on the edge. And sometimes I cannot believe some of the things that you'll read in the book, some things that I recall. And sometimes I ask myself, did that really happen? And yeah, I did. So the book, it's a story about not only me, but about my forefathers, the pain and suffering that they went through to get to Kansas, and then their children, and then their children, and just gradually we began to build on our experiences, and we began to educate ourselves. We began to be a part of mainstream society. My cousin here is an attorney. He's got a brother who's an attorney. My wife is a doctor. That you would have never heard about that when I was growing up. You had a job, usually it was out in the field. My father worked out in the beet fields. That was hard work, but they were happy and pleased to have a job. No complaining, just get up, hard work. So it's been relatively a short period of time when you think about it. In less than 100 years, we've gone from living in a adobe house to I've got another cousin who is an Air Force fighter pilot, jet fighter pilot. We've come a long way. And again, a lot of it is because of friends that I've had, that I still have, that afforded me the opportunity to experience all these wonderful things. How have we been a long time?
Wait. How we? Okay. Okay. I can make a few comments. As you listen, I listened to Ernie. You could see that the amount of material that he has experienced and has lived is large enough to write a book probably 3 times this thick. So when I decided to write the book and spoke with Ernie about it, we tried to select the experiences that best illustrated the qualities that our family had: hard work, take care of your family, better yourselves. And we included the individuals who assisted, encouraged, supported our families to be successful. We had my siblings, Ernie's siblings, and all of our cousins have had similar experiences where it was not just our folks, but our communities and friends and family who helped us to succeed and inspire us. As far as writing the book, I wanted to illustrate what Ernie summarized, his life experiences. And I wanted to highlight individuals who come from the high plains, from the Midwest, what some people call flyover country, people who are in the high plains in the Midwest lead incredible lives. They work incredibly hard, doing the things that I just mentioned: supporting your families, getting your kids educated, living fantastic lives, but nobody's writing about them. Nobody's talking about them. As part of my research for the book on my family, I learned so many things about my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and the things that they went through. And I've included them, especially in the first couple of chapters of the book. If you would, I encourage everyone to, even if you are not going to write the book, talk to your family members, the older members, talk to them now, get their stories down. If you can videotape them, great, but at least interview them, record them, and maybe one of your children or your grandchildren someday are going to say, well, how did they do that? And you're going to say, it's right in here. You can look at this, listen to this tape or watch this video. And they will write books about the history. So many of I can now say the younger kids have no idea what our parents and our grandparents experienced. And so if you can relay that to your children, your grandchildren, and the generations to come, they'll have an understanding and appreciation, and they'll be inspired to pursue the values that got us all here as a community, as a state, as a nation. So I encourage you to do that. And I am thankful to Ernie for sharing with me many of the stories that he did with you in more detail, and many others that we and the publisher didn't want to put in the book. So I encourage you to do that for your families. I wanted to read just a little bit. I think it's about 8 minutes in length.
Before you do that, can I have your permission to take about 10 seconds?
10 seconds, okay.
Not intentionally, but I forgot to mention my daughter-in-law, Christy, another doctor in the family, and my 2 grandchildren that are no longer here, or they're over in the corner tearing things up. But my 10 seconds are up.
All right. So I'll read one of the favorite parts of the book. So if you will bear with me here. On March 23rd, 1957, the third night of spring, a howling blizzard swept across the southwestern plains of Kansas. Travelers were stranded on highways and taken to shelters after their rescue. Residents were told to remain indoors. 60-mile-per-hour winds roared into Garden City, shaking and rattling the doors and windows of the wood-framed homes in the Mexican barrio on Santa Fe Street. The families within could measure the storm's intensity only by the density of the snowflakes as they flew horizontally through the illumination of a single porch light and by the rising snowdrifts outside their doors. In their home on Santa Fe Street, Felipe Garcia assured his sons, Ernie and Jim, that they were safe from the wind and snow. He tried to keep their attention on the radio broadcast of the National Basketball Championship final between the University of Kansas and the University of North Carolina. With 10-year-old Ernie on his lap and Jim, 2 years older, sitting with him, Felipe was ready to lead them into a night of cheering for the Jayhawks. However, any exuberant physical outbursts of cheers had to be avoided as Felipe suffered from heart disease and was in a weakened state. Though Felipe was born in El Paso, Texas in 1918, he was raised in Kansas from the age of 2. He was a sports fan and had developed a passion for KU basketball. Anticipating a repeat of KU's 1952 national championship season, he and the boys had closely followed the 1957 Jayhawk season. Their hopes were spiked by the addition of Wilt Chamberlain to the varsity team. In his debut, Chamberlain scored 52 points and grabbed 31 rebounds, and he went on to dominate play during the regular season. To reach the championship final, KU had survived the regional games in Dallas the week before. The Jayhawks not only prevailed on the scoreboard, but also overcame the racial slurs and coins hurled at them by the fans supporting Southern Methodist University and Oklahoma City University. With their contentious wins in Dallas, the Jayhawks advanced to the final round in Kansas City, Missouri. The final game against North Carolina was hard-fought, intense, and stressful. In the Garcia home, hope and despair rose and fell with each shot made or missed. Each team had opportunities to win the game with a basket at the end of regulation play and overtime. By the time the game went into a third overtime, the snowy tempest in Garden City had left nearly 2 feet of snow and drifts reaching 5 to 6 feet high. The electricity in homes flickered during the storm, resulting in moments of darkness and garbled radio broadcasts. Some homes completely lost power. Back in Kansas City, KU missed its last shot, and North Carolina won the championship 52-51. The Garcias were deeply disappointed, having come so close to winning. With a father's wisdom, Felipe assured his boys that the Jayhawks would have a chance the following year. As the lights in the house continued to flicker, he suggested to his sons in a tone of calm determination that the team needed to work harder to win another championship. As with most people, only a select few moments of Ernie's childhood, those with extreme and intense emotions, were secured in his mind and available for recall during his lifetime. Among Ernie's precious few memories of Felipe were the events on the night of the blizzard of 1957. It was a night unlike any other in his young life, bursting with apprehension, tension, and excitement. Nearly 30 years after that snowy night in southwestern Kansas, a shiny black presidential state car adorned with diplomatic flags slowed to a stop at the steps of the Senate entrance to the U.S. Capitol building. A member of the Secret Service dutifully opened the door for President Ronald Reagan. With a cheerful, "Hello, Ernie," the president greeted the waiting Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, who responded, "Welcome, Mr. President." Ernie Garcia led the president and his entourage through the Capitol building to the House chamber, where the president was to deliver the 1986 State of the Union address. Moments after the housekeeper, James Malloy, announced the arrival of the president, Ernie slowly led President Reagan down to the House Speaker's podium. Legislators and government officials, men with gray hair in dark suits and a few women in red dresses, rushed to the end of their rows to see or be seen with the president. As they walked down the aisle, Ernie's focus on the business of moving the president along was frequently broken with a smile as he noted the president's enthusiastic admirers. When the president handed copies of his speech to the vice president and the Speaker of the House, Ernie took a seat to the president's right. As Ernie listened, he could not avoid stepping back and thinking about his presence in the House chamber at that moment. He was thrilled to be in the presence of the Congress, the President, and the justices of the Supreme Court of the United States, the heart of the most powerful government on earth. He was appreciative of the good fortune that enabled him to lead the President to the podium. He wished that his father, Felipe, was alive to see his role in the evening's events. At the conclusion of the address, in the midst of seemingly endless applause, Ernie led the president and a procession of legislative leaders out of the House chamber and back to the Senate entrance. With his duties completed, Ernie was amazed that a young man from Garden City had accompanied the president, albeit for just a short walk. In the years to come, his amazement would continue to grow as he began learning the road his family had taken and that had led him to the House chamber. It was an improbable journey filled with hardships, forged by perseverance and the events of Mexican and American history. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. A couple of people, well, more than a couple, have asked me, what was your motivation to write the book? And I will summarize them just very briefly. First is and foremost is Ernie's amazing life experiences. They're just inspiring. They illustrate that if you set your dreams, work hard for them, go after them with enthusiasm, you can reach them. All things are possible. My second was to, again, as I said earlier, show the country that people in the middle are living incredible lives, and people need to know about it, write about them. My third objective I can summarize, and it's related to the first two chapters of the book about our great-grandfather and our grandfather, and that is that immigrants contribute to the goodness and value of our country. With that, Ernie, I think, because he's perhaps is a little reluctant to shine light on himself, but I would like to thank him for the service for our country, and to acknowledge and recognize the service of Senator Dole, which sometimes people forget or put aside. They focus on his political career as opposed to the service he gave. And Ernie, if you want to mention Frank.
Yeah. In recent weeks, my thoughts have been jumbled, to say the least. It's been approximately a month that my brother Frank, who's also a Marine, unexpectedly passed away. I'm still not quite sure that I've fully realized that. He was my brother, my younger brother, and I will sorely miss him. He's another crazy jarhead. Loved the Marine Corps, Vietnam, machine gunner. He liked to live on the edge too. But he died in his sleep, so that's one thing I can be thankful for, unlike so many others who spend years in pain and suffering. But it doesn't reduce our pain and suffering. He's gone, and like I said, I still can't believe that he's gone. But I want to pay tribute to him for his service to our country. He was a guy that looked up to me and to my older brother Jim, who's back in the back. We're a tight family, and but in many ways we did our own thing, and certainly Frank did. He did crazy things, but he didn't get thrown in jail like I did.
So I would like to ask you to join me in thanking Ernie, my cousin, and again recognizing Senator Dole for their service to our country. Thank you. How are we doing on time? Yeah. Okay, so I guess we're ready for the question and answer session. And
Don't be shy.
how's this going to work? If you have a question, raise your hand, and then they'll hand you the mic.
Folks, I'm Mark Goodlow. I retired from the Kansas Highway Patrol about 3 years ago after 32 and a half years. This is more about the man than a question. But Ernie, so infrequently are we able to publicly say thank you in front of your friends and colleagues. And for everybody in this room, I just want you to know when Colonel Garcia came to town, he brought a breadth of leadership tenets, I'm sure garnered from the United States Marine Corps. He always gave me a hard time because I was in the Air Force, as if it was a non-service, but hey, we're right there with you. We bring you where you go, right? So I digress, but I wanted to say thank you publicly for the tenets of leadership that you instilled in some and refreshed in others. And that has made the Kansas Highway Patrol a much better agency today than prior to your service. And as a good Boy Scout, you always leave it better than you found it. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you. This is not so much a question, but more of a comment. I've had the opportunity to read the book, and maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I want to just say that the story is amazing. It's incredible. Ernie's leadership capabilities and all of the amazing events that happened along the way. And thank you very much to Dennis for telling the story in an expert way. He had the ability to weave in history, struggles. I mean, it's very relatable to all people, I think, who would take the time to read it. And I just think you did a wonderful, wonderful job. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Somebody's got to say something bad.
There we go.
I knew it.
I want to know if you paid the speeding ticket you got in Annapolis Harbor. in the harbor.
Okay.
You know me, so quick question. Who in your life was your most memorable person?
Aside from my parents, obviously,
Obviously.
one of the greatest and memorable experiences that I could ever ask for was meeting Pope John Paul, not only once, but 3 times. And he remembered me. and very quickly, I went with a congressional delegation of Italian-American congressmen. And they were all Italians, Guarini, Supelli, there were about 15 of them. And we had an audience with the Pope in his office. And the Pope, knew that it was an Italian-American delegation, and so he began to speak in Italian. The chairman of the CODEL could speak Italian, so that was not a problem. But not one of the Italian-American congressmen could speak Italian. And so he made some comment like, you're not doing your duty, you ought to be able to speak Italian. And then he came, I forget the sequence, but he ended up talking to me. Oh yeah, that's right. When I initially met him, I told him my name, and he said, "Are you of Mexican descent?" Yeah. So we talked a little bit in Spanish, and so when he found out that the Italian delegation couldn't speak Italian, he came back to me, and I know very little Italian, just enough to get in trouble. But I did engage with the Pope in Italian, and that's when he scolded them again for not being able to speak Italian. But it was just not only spiritual for me, but it was, I can't even describe it. When we took a group picture, I made sure that I stood right behind him, and I grabbed his cassock, his white robe, and held it. And I felt so privileged. And I went to a seminary. I studied to become a priest. I didn't become a father, but I became a father of another kind. There's the proof right there. But yeah, that probably is probably the thing that I will always remember. He is now a saint. He was, I forget who did it, but to think back on that, not only once, but 3 times. So, yeah, that's probably got to be the most memorable.
I'm Sydney Campschrader, and my brother Randy Bowling was one of Ernie's best friends in high school, and I was at KU when Ernie moved in with my family for a little while, and all I've got to say is I know stories you would never believe.
And I've known Ernie since kindergarten.
Wow.
And I have stories.
I'm going to ask the difficult question. I was going to ask this actually about your view of what Senator Dole might have responded. I'm sorry. I have a difficult question for you, and that is, what do you think we can do that are in the audience to change the climate in Washington?
In November, there's an election. That's how you can do it. I'm as frustrated as I think you are. I was in the Senate when, as I've said before, when Democrats and Republicans would work together. They would compromise. That's not happening today at any level from what I can see. How can we change that? Be sure and vote. But know the issues. When I sometimes talk to somebody about one party or the other, I ask them, why do you feel that way? Usually they can't tell me. What do you think of the economy? They don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. What do you think of how we're doing in foreign policy? Hell, they don't know what I'm talking about, But they know they're against this guy and for this guy. That's disheartening. We as a people need to know who we are, who we send to Washington, who we send to Topeka. We are the ones that can do it. in Mexico, it is mandatory that you vote. So you get a lot of that. You know, if you don't vote, I think you get fined. So it's just, you know, marking the X. But we live in a democracy where you have a choice. And I don't know what the percentage is of people who do not vote in this country, but I would suspect that it's pretty high. So my answer to you, and it's not a flippant answer, it's a simple answer, but it's an answer that I think we all can help by voting.
You've experienced a lot of things in your lifetime to tell you that you deserve a rest, but what are your plans and hopes and dreams for the future?
Quite simply, what I'm doing today, it's an opportunity to talk to people. I particularly like to talk to young people who may not aspire to much other than graduating from high school. I want to be able to show them, tell them that someone who came from the same neighborhood was able to do it. But I explained that it's not about one person or two people or people from that section of town or from that section, but everybody and anybody. And that was my privilege. My best friend, Randy Bowling, some would say, well, why wasn't it Tony Mendoza? Well, Tony Mendoza was a friend of mine. But I had friends from here and from there, and conservative, liberal. I learned from everybody, and that's what I would encourage, especially young people. There's so much out there that we can learn from and gain from, and we live in a digital society. I mean, now you talk to somebody on. I mean, I could be sitting here, and I'm emailing you to say hello. It used to be that we used to have to actually go and look at each other and have personal contact. You know, when I write to Senator Dole, I literally write to him. I don't email him. I write him an actual note, and he has mentioned that. What I want to continue to do is to try to make a difference in people's lives by telling them some of my experiences.
I appreciate your suggestion that to change things in Washington, we vote. But as you know, there's a great effort to suppress voting in this country. And in Kansas, it happens to be mostly of Latinos.
Yeah.
Dodge City has, you know, a large town, one polling place outside of town. I wonder if you have any suggestions about what we can do to rectify that situation.
Well, it's along the same lines. Whenever there's something not working very well in our society, there is a process. The example you cite in Dodge City, you know, where are the leaders of Dodge City? Why isn't somebody really moaning and groaning about the disparity, the unjust? You know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So, I mean, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm also sorry to hear that there's not been outrage from the community. And again, a lot of them will say, I don't know, I don't care, you know, I got too many other things to do. That's the kind of attitude that not only presents opportunities for those who would take advantage of that, but it really does hurt our community as a whole. It's not easy, but I think we as a community need to point those things out. You know, the two senators from Kansas ought to know that. The congressional representative from that district should know that. They should be held accountable. I mean, and I don't know if they are or not, but they should know about it, and they ought to be pushing buttons to make sure that doesn't happen. It sounds like a Department of Justice issue for me. Good question.
Uncle Dennis, I wanted to thank you. I had an opportunity to start rereading the book on the way up from Wichita here, and I was just amazed at the storytelling you were able to do. You know, words can't give it enough justice as to how you were able to, especially the family part, you know, to go back to help explain how we got to this moment. And so I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
You're welcome.
Pops, going to put you on the spot here. You know, I had the unique opportunity to be there with you while you were working for Senator Dole. I think I was, 5, 6 years old. I remember seeing the senator. He might as well have been 10 feet tall, and playing with some of the toys that he had. I say toys, they were actually like models and trucks of agricultural equipment that, you know, people had given him, and they might as well have been toys for me because he actually gave me one.
Right.
And I remember that fondly. And so I had very fond memories of meeting and interacting with Senator Dole. I kind of thought he was a mean man because he was, like you said, very straight to the point, very direct, but obviously he was very, he was a very influential figure in your life as well as mine. And would you be willing to share a story about how he influenced you, something that maybe you haven't relayed to anyone, about how influential this man was to you in your professional career?
Well, I had the opportunity and the honor to go with him to Italy, to where he was shot, right outside of a small town in Italy, Castigliano. And we all knew that we were going there, but we didn't know that he wanted to go up to where he was actually shot. And so we were all kind of standing back, and then he turns to me and says, come on. And so I followed him. And when he got to where he thought the spot was, where he was shot, he cried. And if any one of you know Bob Dole, that's not an easy thing for him to do. But he cried. And I was honored that he asked me to go with him. I didn't say anything, but I was there. We stayed there for a little bit, quite a bit, in fact. But that's probably one of the things I'll never, ever forget about the senator. It showed me that he had, and I ended up knowing this, but he's a good man, hardworking guy. No chit chat, and I think I kind of seeped into his heart by not trying to chit chat with him. A lot of staff tried to do that, and I could tell he didn't want to chit chat. And so he would often ask me to go with him to places, and I wouldn't say, if he didn't talk to me, I wouldn't talk to him, and he loved it. But he had a tremendous influence on me, as you know. Philip became a U.S. Senate page, not only once, but twice. That's an experience that you'll take with you forever. But he opened up a lot of doors for me and my family, and I'll forever be grateful to him.
Ernie, like you well know, I spent a lot of years in the service of Bob Dole too, and we spent a lot of years in service together for Bob Dole. Many of his elections were pretty easy, but some of them were really, really tough. And I want want to say Ernie and his efforts in some of those tight races were instrumental in the win. But as I sat here, Ernie, I couldn't help but think that not only was it Bob Dole, it was our great compatriots in arms that I sat back here and remembered, like Wolford and Taggart and Claude, who were so instrumental in a lot of those things too.
Dave mentions Claude Alexander from Ulysses, Kansas, West Point graduate, Ranger, got his leg shot off in Vietnam, hard as nails, hardworking. He was I was his understudy. He taught me a lot so that I didn't get in trouble, and he did a great job. But he unfortunately was, he and his son jumped out of an airplane. They were parachuting, and he came down too hard, and as a result, he died. But many of our friends who Dave just mentioned are gone. So I'm not going to parachute anytime soon.
We have time, gentlemen, for one more question, and then I want to get on to the book signing. If somebody raises their hand really fast, otherwise I'm going to ask for, okay, we have one question right here. Last question. Just wait for the mic, please, sir.
What happened to the rooster?
What happened to what?
To the rooster.
They crossed the street. I'm sorry, I didn't get the memo.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thank you,
you,
everyone.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Remember to pick up a book. It's right outside in the lobby. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.